We got some breaking news. This is going to be a bombshell video. Today, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Anthony Guterres, invoked Article 99 for the first time in a long time. This almost never happens. It's because he knows that the shit is about to hit the fan. Now, there are only four overarching data points that you really truly need to understand to be a dilettante speculator at your family gatherings this holiday season. And I'm going to lay it out for you in plain English, because this all came together for me today perfectly, synchronistically, into this framework that you can utilize to understand what is very likely about to happen. Almost needs to happen, I would say, for them to move forward with whatever agenda is they have up their sleeve. I'm talking, of course, about our good friends, the neocons. Data point number one. The Russians have obviously been withholding in this fight against Ukraine. Any honest military analyst who isn't disingenuous or isn't beholden to the mass media military-industrial complex will tell you the same. If the Russians wanted to, they could likely lay Kiev to waste. They could have done it a long time ago. The fact that they haven't yet doesn't mean they're good guys. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying atrocities haven't been committed. What I'm saying is that there's a reason why they've been holding back their best troops, their best military assets, the amount of troops that they're willing to commit. Currently, the last count was 450,000 troops in Ukraine, about a quarter of their active duty military personnel. Of course, they're still expanding. They've been limited or self-limiting in their expansion of their military. In spite of the increased funding of the military budget, they haven't embarked on any sort of full-scale mass mobilization yet. In spite of support for the war, in spite of Putin's high popularity levels, there's a reason for this. And the reason is, as we've been saying all along, is because they're saving it because they know a war with NATO is on the horizon. So they don't want to put all their cards in Ukraine, get exhausted. They learned from the battle in Austerlitz. They've learned that they need to be more measured in terms of how many troops and resources and the sophistication of the technology that they're willing to allocate to the battlefield. Okay, so that is point number one. And again, if the Russians wanted to, they could have laid Kiev to ruins a long time ago. The fact that they haven't utilized nuclear weapons, the fact that there are only 450,000 troops, the fact that they've been somewhat restrained, not entirely, I'm not saying they're not getting their butts kicked in certain places or haven't at times, but the fact that they've been restrained is saying something. They're preparing for a war with NATO. Data point number two is that in the past 24 hours, we've heard pretty much every single person in the Biden administration, all high-ranking military personnel, analysts, even bipartisan politicians on the other side of the aisle saying the exact same thing, that if we don't get support for Ukraine now, it's going to be American troops who are going to be dying fighting the Russians. Okay, so that is number two. So we know that NATO is mobilizing in the Baltics. If you've been watching the last couple videos, I've went into great depth about why NATO absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, needs to stay in this war. They cannot pull out of this war. Okay, if the Ukrainian front line collapses because those troops get wind that the Americans are no longer going to be supporting them, and it will collapse fast, okay, when it starts to happen. If that happens, then NATO is fucked. Okay, and I gave plenty of reasons. I did a whole half-an-hour video on it, I think 2 videos ago. But they absolutely need to commit. So, data point number one, I know that was long-winded. The Russians have been withholding. Data point number two is that NATO is preparing to go to war with the Russians, and they're now threatening, if they don't get funding for Ukraine, to convince Ukrainian troops to go and die on NATO's behalf. They're going to have to do it themselves, okay? Data point number three, this ongoing border crisis issue that appears to be holding up the advance and march towards war on 3 fronts: Taiwan, Israel, and Ukraine, possibly sometime in the not-so-distant future, Korea and Venezuela as well. But those 3 primary fronts, the thing that is holding it back right now is the reluctance of Democrats to budge on this issue of the border. That's data point number 3. It's going to become more relevant in just a minute. Data point number 4 is that the FBI director, many intelligence agencies around the world are saying that the risk of terror attacks inside the United States and throughout the West right now are the highest that they've ever been. Okay, in fact, some are even saying that it could happen. It's very likely that it's going to happen before Christmas time. So, all of those key 4 data points. Number 1, Russia is withholding most of their forces because they don't want to get outflanked and get caught with their pants down by NATO. Number 2, NATO is clearly preparing for war with the Russians. Number 3, there's an ongoing border crisis. Number 4, the threat of terrorist attacks. Russia, NATO, terrorist attacks, border crisis. Russia, NATO, border crisis, terrorist attacks. What was that presentation that Steve Jobs gave? I think it was the unveiling of the original iPhone. Think about those things for a sec. What would be a neocon's wet dream? Well, it would involve a major flashbulb event, something that you will remember where you were when it happened, okay? So a big terrorist attack. What would be next on the wish list? Well, we got to get this border situation on lockdown. We got to, tighten up national security. And we got to advance to war with the Russians. We need funding for war on all fronts. You bring those 4 things together, what do you get? Well, the ideal scenario, if you were a neocon, would be to have a major terrorist attack that you could attribute to the axis of Yemeni, Houthi, Persian, Sino, Russo, Hezbollah, Hamas, Venezuelan, Sudan, the list goes on, right? North Korea. You could attribute it to the axis. Ideally, that would be the most opportune terrorist attack to usher in a new era of war profiteering. Because you can close the border, you can get bipartisan support for this bill, because at that point, the Democrats are going to be like, all right, we got to close the border because the terrorists are coming across, right? And we know that, according to Homeland Security, that there has been a high risk of sleeper cells coming in under the wire, possibly getting ready to stage some critical infrastructural attacks. And of course, there's always a looming threat of cyber attack. And this is what the UK is preparing their people for. The Deputy Prime Minister, remember, came out just 2 days ago and he said, you need to start stockpiling stuff because there might be a cyber attack or another pandemic. It's always the one they put last. So I think he said, the way he phrased it was, you need to prepare for either a pandemic, a natural disaster, or a cyber attack. What did you say? A cyber attack. Right? We know that there's this stuff going on at Seafield nuclear facility where apparently it's been hit by a cyber attack several times in the last 10 years by the Russians, even though it's impossible to really attribute blame in a cyber attack. It's very difficult to trace where it came from. The only way you can really do it, as far as I understand, is to judge by the magnitude of the attack for the most part. So a large-scale attack would likely require a nation state. Anyways, those 4 things. How perfect would it be if you had a major event, a major attack? Okay, I'm not trying to be AJ here, who was just interviewed by Tucker Carlson. That's not what I'm trying to be, but I'm just connecting some dots here. This is what you would need right now to rally the American people to go full steam ahead on a conflict. You would need a major attack. It would have to be border related, some breach in the border. They came across the border, right? And then it would have to somehow be attributable to, ideally, I guess it would be, who would be the best one to pin it on? Some collusion between the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, and Hamas. That would be, the neocon wet dream. If you caught 4 guys and there were of those 4 nationalities, that would be a blank check for at least 10 years. Because remember, after 9/11, it took 20 years for that Afghanistan war to fizzle out. 20 years. And by the upper estimates, $5 trillion in funding. So that's what you need, because right now support for the Ukrainian war is waning. It is below 50%, I'm sure. And that's probably on the most generously worded subjective polls that's out there. So they need something big to happen, and they need it fast. And as I said before, they must continue with the Ukrainian campaign. They cannot relent in that respect because it's the end game for the U.S. Now, maybe that's what they're preparing for. Maybe they're getting ready to throw in the towel. Maybe this is World War II. But it really starts to look like World War II. And what happened partway through World War II? Well, Pearl Harbor happened. Okay? And that's when you had the highest debt to GDP ratio in American history, next to right now, before the war starts. So we're talking about a colossal shift. Everybody is talking about, I think Jamie Dimon sold a bunch of shares, 160 million shares in whatever big bank that he's invested in, and that's supposed to take place. A lot of people are saying around March, that's when the shit's going to hit the fan in the markets, even if everything remains peachy up until that point, geopolitically speaking. So this is why I believe Anthony Guterres is saying Article 99. Article 99 is a special power and the only independent political tool given to the Secretary General. Now, it's going to be all for naught because Canada, the United States, Israel, and all the usual suspects are going to vote against anything that goes against the interests of the military-industrial complex. Now, I'm not naive to this world. I understand that if somebody's going to rule the world, I guess I would like it to be us, okay? In spite of the fact that we're the only ones to ever drop nuclear bombs and we tell ourselves we're the good guys when 20,000 civilians have just been slaughtered in Gaza. Hey, you know, we tell ourselves we're the good guys. We still deep down believe in our hearts, heart of hearts, that we are the good ones here, that we are fighting the good fight for democracy. And anybody who isn't is just evil and they need to be eradicated. Maybe the jury's still out on that. Anyways, see, that's what happens when I think out loud. I'm a thinker. I'm a critical thinker. When you're politically agnostic like I am, I don't think the algorithm likes that much. And that's why perhaps we're not getting any traction in suggested videos and the search bar and all that. Anyways, sorry about the tangent, guys. I apologize. Call a meeting to the Security Council on his own initiative. Just got to check my 6 here. I heard a little noise. Everything's all good. All right. Security Council on its own initiative to issue warnings about new threats to international peace and security in matters that are not yet known. Now, look at all the high-level meetings that have been taking place. Putin leaving the country, risking his life with fighter jets. You don't do that unless we're at a serious potential inflection point, junction in human history, okay? You don't have the Iranian, the president of Iran going to Moscow immediately after. This is all related. You don't have shit popping off in Venezuela for no reason. You don't have North Korea getting closer to the border, stocking up food. You don't have the Taiwanese saying today that they got 141 F-16s that are all fully upgraded and ready to go. You don't have these incursions into Taiwanese airspace more than we've ever seen before. You don't have the high-level meeting with Biden and Xi Jinping. That always happens before they're getting ready to go to war. You have the one last meeting. It happened with Biden and Putin. It's going to happen with Biden and Xi Jinping. All of these things are happening. And we can all just feel it in the air that they're about to do some crazy shit, right? Now, today, this is breaking news. I mean, I think the event has possibly dissipated for now, but it's the start. Far-right groups, as they're being called, and this is from an Israeli publication, Haaretz, which I think is more left-leaning in Israel, but they are claiming that a far-right group has been greenlit by the Israeli police to rally for a takeover of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, I'm not a religious person, so I don't know a lot about, you know, the Holy Land, as it's called, and all this stuff. But apparently this is a very, very important site for Muslims, like right up there, in the top 3, okay? So they're talking about storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the holiest site. Now, if you think tearing up a picture of Muhammad is going to get somebody, is going to cause a ruckus, is going to cause a riot. If you do that, it's game over. It's lights out, it's fire all the missiles. The Houthis are going berserk, which they've already stated they're going to today. Now they're saying that they're going to attack Djibouti and bases, military bases within Chad. So they're expanding their operations. And now the Americans, I believe it was Central Command, who came out and said that they now think that it's the Iranians not only providing the weapons, but also providing the planning and strategy around these attacks. We're still waiting for that Houthi response to the recent attack against the Houthis by what we presume must be the Israelis. So we are going to see that powder keg explode in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. Right now, the protests have kind of subsided a bit around the world. Not so much in the Middle East, they're still ongoing. But you notice, and I got to give credit, because I originally thought that the Israelis were strategic fools, much like the rest of the Western leaders are, because of course we have to think in 4-year terms, because it's all about getting reelected, deep state aside, right? And tactically, they're pretty cunning. They're pretty good when it comes to tactical matters, usually. Maybe not so much against in a hybrid war, asymmetrical sense. But anyway, so what was I? Geez, all these tangents. So they, something about them planning ahead. Yes. So you'll notice the attacks that are ongoing right now are as severe as they were before. You have the same amount of people dying, yet the amount of attention towards the issue has fizzled out. You know, it's almost like they looked at Google Trending and they said, okay, once it gets down to this point, once the topic, Israel-Gaza war gets down to here, that's when we're going to make our move. That's when we're going to invade. That's when, we're going to ramp it up. And sure enough, that's what's happening. But if you want to kick that hornet's nest, and maybe somebody in the Netanyahu government wants to, because they obviously have their own political motivations for why they need to keep this war going. That's not just from me, that's from Israeli inside sources as well. So, yeah, not good, not good, not good. If that happens, it's game over. We're in World War III, without a doubt. Nobody's going to be able to contain that. The only hope is that maybe the IRGC militias and Hezbollah doesn't take the bait, but it appears as though that they're trying to trigger the Muslim world into doing some sort of reaction. Lloyd Austin has warned Congress that failing to pass additional aid for Ukraine could very likely result in U.S. troops engaged in war in Europe. Very likely. Very likely. Joe Biden says if we lose to Russia in Ukraine, U.S. troops will be on the ground. This is not the first time he said it. This is not the first manner in which he said this. They're saying that eventually they're going to war with Russia, whether we like it or not. That's essentially what it means. Read the subtext, folks. Michael McCall, House Foreign Affairs Chairman, highlighted the gravity of the situation, noting that the deployment of U.S. troops is something they're trying to avoid, but it becomes a likely outcome without adequate support for Ukraine. We're trying to do the best we can here by sending Ukrainians to their deaths, but we may have to send our own if you don't, John Kirby, if you think the cost of supporting Ukraine is high now, just imagine how much higher it's going to be, not just in national treasure, but in American blood. And he was the one at that same press conference today said that the Houthis are the ones pulling the trigger and Iran is providing the guns. So you're seeing this all come together now. It all comes together with my hypothesis about an attack coming across the border being attributed to the axis of evil. They get everything they need in one fell swoop. Janet Yellen, we can hold ourselves responsible for Ukraine's defeat if we don't get funding. Why is Janet Yellen commenting on this? Isn't she the money man or money woman? No offense, Janet Yellen. Isn't that her thing? Is she talking about the collapse of the U.S. economy? Is that what they're hinting at here? What I've been saying for some time, the reason why they need to stay in Ukraine is for a variety of reasons I'm not going to get into. Yeah, they got to keep the Germans down, the Russians out, the Americans in, because if that euro starts ramping up with that cheap Russian gas, guess who gets edged out? Well, it's the US dollar. For that and about 50 other reasons I went into in a deep dive, the longest video I ever did, 2 videos ago. Go and watch it. It'll explain everything you need to know. Mark Milley urges Ukrainians to slit Russians' throats. I don't even need quotes there. I don't know why I did. I'm just getting so used to quotes just to cover my ass here on YouTube. We're already shadow banned in the search. There shouldn't be any Russian that goes to bed without wondering if his throat will be cut. What a great thing to say when you're trying to wind down operations. FBI director, never been more worried about a terror attack than now. Lindsey Graham, never been more worried about a terror attack than now. The threat level at the U.S. border is the highest it's ever been. According to Homeland Security Threat Assessment this year, border agents have encountered a growing number of migrants on the FBI's terrorist watch list trying to cross the border. And it was really in reading or listening to Lindsey Graham today, a link that a friend of mine sent me where he's talking about these things, and it all just clicked. It's like they're trying to telegraph that they want to bundle up border security with foreign policy. And how do you do that? Well, a terror attack that comes through the border. Simple. Warnings of terror attacks before Christmas. Eva Johansson, the European Home Affairs Commissioner, has warned that we're likely to see knock-on effects in Europe as a result of the Israel-Hamas war, and that there is a huge risk, not just a slight risk, or not a risk, or a moderate risk, or a high risk, a huge risk of terrorist attacks before Christmas. And now we're already starting to hear that Biden might be willing to compromise. This is according to Reuters, that Biden may be willing to make compromises to get the votes needed to help Ukraine. Now we got this Hunter Biden stuff that just popped up in my feed that I could really care less about. I know it has implications into corruption, and it's important, but at the same time, let's not let politics take us away from what are clearly the bigger geopolitical plays here, okay? It appears as though the Ukrainian, pro-Ukraine NAFO crowd is even starting to turn. There's an account called Jay in Kiev, a very prominent pro-Ukrainian Twitter account, who said the following today: Ukraine is now facing a dark winter with very little hope. The U.S. is no longer an ally to be trusted. What have I been saying for the longest time? The reason why the U.S. is withholding is because they don't trust Ukraine. They don't trust that they can win, and they don't want shit falling into the wrong hands. Number one, with Russia, they need to hold back their stuff in reserve. It's like both Russia and the USA are playing the same game. So maybe there is some military deep state component. I don't even like using the term deep state because it's so conspiratorial, but maybe they are both playing the same game, and they really are just withholding their best, and they're saying, oh, well, we got nothing, and all this talk about how they're running out of weapons. I mean, we really don't know when it comes down to it. We pretend like we know, but there's black budgets. They're not going to put all their cards out there for the world to see. I mean, how strategic would that be? I mean, if you're telling me that there's things that are classified that are far less important from a national security perspective, you know, why would they disclose how many shells they had left? Why would they disclose how many ATACMS they had left? People are just speculating about these things. So we don't really know what the big plan is, what the end game plan is. You got Poland saying, oh, we only got 3 years before the Russians attack. You got Germany saying that we're preparing for war. Like all of these countries. Patrick Ryder last year, I believe that was his name, the general of the top guy in the UK military, saying that we're preparing to go to war with the Russians. So they all know what's coming. So it's all like they're using the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians are finally starting to realize that. Arestovich is a great example, former advisor to Zelensky, he just outright said the other day, this is him saying it, not me, YouTube. He said that maybe we chose the wrong side in this war. That's what they're worried about. They're worried about Ukraine turning around, taking all that experience, all that military. I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. There's going to be a lot more bloodshed. There's going to be a lot of people who are hardline nationalists who are never going to align with the Russians. Absolutely. But what I'm saying is it's possible. Okay? And you even have Russian politicians now saying that they're willing to put to a vote, or they're proposing to put to a vote the annexation of more territories. We're already talking about the annexation of the Sea of Azov, which seems stupid because they already have Crimea and it's behind that as far as I know. So towards the Russian side. But we're talking about the annexation of the other oblasts, all the way up to potentially the entirety of Ukraine, which we know Poland will never allow. Okay, and now they've circumvented the blockade of the Ukraine-Polish border by putting all the semis on trains. It's a sight to see. We even got David Cameron in there, you know, the one of the brains behind the whole Iraq war fiasco, the foreign minister of UK back in 2003, I believe. He's saying that if you don't stop Putin here, he's coming back for more, and the enemies of America will be cheering, he says. So, 4 things. That's all you need to know. Russia has been withholding. They're getting ready for a war with NATO. NATO's starting to talk about said war. The border crisis is ramping up, and you got a terrorist threat. Those things are going to come together very, very soon. Houthis want immediate escalation. Okay? So it appears as though Iran, according to U.S. officials now, and I don't see how this isn't at least partly true based on the weapon systems that, you know, the Houthis have, that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is directly involved not only in the delivery of weapon systems, but also in the planning and execution of these attacks. So they're trying to pin it on them. And I noticed from the body language in the meeting with Ibrahim Raisi today with Vladimir Putin, which was a very long meeting, and that shows you just how intense this actually is. It shows you that the situation is dire when you have such high-ranking meetings happening all around the world at the same time, whether it's Xi Jinping, Biden, Raisi, you know, Putin flying with all the fighter jets. But he looked very uneasy. You'll notice his body language. He did not look like a man who 100% trusts Vladimir Putin. And Putin looked conniving in a way. If you go and you actually watch what they showed of the meeting, Putin did not look like a man that you would trust. Because remember, he just came back from a meeting with their arch nemesis, the Saudis, and we all know how that went out. They got the red carpet rolled out. There were all kinds of high fives and memes about that. And so now you're Raisi, who's been giving this guy weapons, drones, and you don't know if you can trust him. Now, the Russians, they're trying to be everybody's friend, right? But everybody knows it's getting down to crunch time. You have to pick a side. The Russians were trying to broker the deal with the JCPOA for the Iranians to have access to a nuclear program, not nuclear weapons program, but just nuclear energy. And unfortunately, that fell through for the Iranians. So the Iranians don't really know because, of course, Netanyahu and Putin were best buddies back in the day. And apparently, MBS is best buddies with Vladimir Putin as well. I mean, they got the royal red carpet treatment when they went to the United Arab Emirates. So the Iranians, they don't know what to really make of this, right? They don't know if they're getting played by the Russians as well. So for them, this is kind of an existential situation, especially when you know about all the riots and the uprisings that have attempted to subvert the Iranian population throughout the last 15 years. They've tried and failed, they being whatever intelligence agencies are in there trying to foment a color revolution in Iran. So the Iranians are scared right now because they're the ones in the crosshairs, and they don't know if they can trust the Russians. If they truly could trust the Russians, even though the Russians, okay, granted, the Russians are giving them Su-35s, they're giving them helicopters, but, you know, even that, is that just Russia playing both sides of the fence? They gave India S-400, yet they're working with, or they gave Turkey S-400, but they're, you know, at odds with Turkey. So, you know, they're trying, and there's all these countries on the fence, but when it gets down to the wire, somebody's going to have to choose a side. And it could work out that maybe there is some sort of deal brokered between the Saudis, the Iranians, and the Russians that is going to pit them against the Israelis and the Americans. And that's the nightmare scenario. I don't think that's going to be the case because the Saudis are one of the biggest purchasers of American weapons. They allow the Americans to utilize their airspace to do attacks on Yemen or wherever else. So it seems unlikely, but you just never know. Like I say, there's all these countries who are on the fence, who are going to do what's right for them. And when the time comes, they're going to be on the opposing side. And that's the problem with fence sitters in the geopolitical sphere, is you never know if you can trust them or not, because they could go one way or the other. That's why countries need these alliances in Article 5s, because that's the only way you can guarantee somebody's going to come to your back, right? The U.S. has voted down a resolution that would allow for the withdrawal of troops from Syria, so we're staying in Syria. There was a big attack on Lebanon today. The Israeli rhetoric towards Lebanon is ratcheting it up. I do believe that they're going in there soon. Yoav Gallant says Israel must push Hezbollah beyond the Litani River in southern Lebanon, which I'm not sure, but that might be the 40-kilometer boundary that they're referring to. They're really trying to goad Hezbollah into a counterattack, which would be substantial enough to bring the United States into the war. U.S. Southern Command is beginning exercises with Guyana. I mean, right when we thought that South America was quiet, think about how perfect this is from a World War III perspective. All of a sudden, and this point bears repeating, I know I've been saying this over and over again, Venezuela is sitting on the largest amount of oil in the world, as far as I know, just right up there with Saudi Arabia. Maybe the tar sands are up there too in Canada. But in terms of the good oil, right, they have it. And all of a sudden, this Guyana situation kicks off. Now, I don't know enough about the backstory. I don't know if they're being provoked. I don't know who is initiating what, if they just smell blood in the water and they're going for it like most countries are right now, and they smell weakness. They see the United States is occupied. They don't think they're going to come to their aid. But this is also an excuse for the Americans to go to war with Venezuela and whoever is willing to join them, and maybe test Brazil, test the resolve of this BRICS thing, right? So it's insane that now they're already getting ready to annex 70% of that territory. And Guyana doesn't have a sizable military. However, it would be jungle warfare. So think about that. That would mean the U.S. would be fighting proxy conflicts, possibly direct conflicts in the tropics, in the rainforest, in the desert, because the tropics, I guess, would be like the islands in Taiwan. And you'd have the boreal forest, not the boreal, but the northern forest in Russia, and those regions, the frontier, I should say, the kind of prairie / farmland regions of Ukraine, of the front. So they'd be fighting wars in every biome of the world, pretty much. It's absolutely crazy. And the fact that, you know, they're trying to facilitate this far-right march just to provoke Muslims into doing crazy shit is like doing crazy shit to provoke people into doing crazy shit. Would not advise. I got a lot of other stuff to talk about, but I'm going to save it for tomorrow. We got to talk about AI. We got to talk about what Elon Musk is doing, because I don't think a lot of people see exactly what's happening there, and other things. But if you want to get your preps before Christmas from CanadianPreparedness.com anyways, you pretty much have to put in the order either tomorrow or early next week at the absolute latest. So tomorrow or throughout the weekend. After that, there's no guarantees you're going to get your package on time. You can get gift certificates through the store. It helps support the channel. And we do have a lot of prepping, actionable content for you that's about to be released. Hunting videos, all kinds of stuff. Just outdoor survival skill videos, preparedness-related videos. Stuff that puts in easier terms for somebody who's a novice to this current events analysis. Puts in simple terms. We got videos coming out that are going to help you better understand what World War III is, what it will look like. We got guests that we're going to be interviewing. Somebody who's written books on the psychology of preparedness. Tomorrow we're going to be interviewing an expert in the field of energy and how energy factors into what's going on in the world, and energy scarcity, and just all things, talking about peak oil or lack of peak oil, or what is peak oil, or what is the new peak oil. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So we just got so much work left to do here in terms of trying to enrich people's perspectives, get people prepared for the uncertainty that awaits, that I hope that whatever sort of search shadow ban that we have on our channel right now gets lifted. Because apparently that is the case. I went and tested it myself today, and I was a little disheartened to see that the channel comes up, but none of the videos come up. And it's weird. It's incredibly eerie. I would encourage you to go do this. Just type in Canadian Prepper. And I'm not, well, you guys know me, I'm not one to whine. If it's my time to die, it's my time to die, in terms of being a channel, not, in real life. I'm just quoting the Matrix Revolutions guy there. Such an epic scene. Anyways, if it's my time to go, I guess it's my time to go. But it's eerie when you see it. And I've had the walls close in on me before. There was a time when all at once I started getting messages from all the major media platforms. And it was right before, now that I think about it in hindsight, it was the truckers thing was going on, and it was right before the war started. And no, maybe was it 2021? No, it was 2021. Because after the pandemic, the channel kind of started to go a little parabolic. It was 2021, it was. And I had my PayPal suspended. Shopify was giving us gears. YouTube was giving us gears. Facebook banned the account. It was just everything all within the same week. Now, I'm not saying it was coordinated. It could have been, I think there was some panic because of, there was just this crackdown because of all the stuff that was going on at the time. So everybody just kind of tightened their core. I'm trying to be optimistic here, guys. I think you probably understand what I really think. But anyways, so there was this seemingly concerted effort to rattle my cage. And just to see, typing in my name on YouTube, thousands, well, not quite thousands, but well over 1,000 videos, okay? And our video view hits are high. So we're getting a lot of engagement day after day. We're getting a lot of watch time. What we're not getting is any measure of channel growth that we should be getting, I would think, at this point in time. And I'm not tooting my own horn. Look, I'm my own worst enemy, my biggest self-critic right here. Okay, I know all the ways that I can improve, and pretty much any prominent YouTuber is probably like this. You make a video and you're just like, oh man, that was absolutely terrible, right? So we know we put out some cringe content, but we still think that there's enough there that we should have hit some flywheel effect by now. We're talking like going to the next level. But I remind myself all the time, and I was having a chat with a friend about this the other day, and I just kind of made this up. It's a quote. If you can quote me if you want. It's better to be on the B side for a lifetime than it is to be on the A side for a year, say something stupid, and then quickly wind up on the D side. So if this is the purgatory that we're in terms of social media exposure at this level, where we're getting 2, 3, 4, 500,000 views, 500,000 views is rare. It's usually around 2 to 3, and we're just appealing to our audience. I'm going to accept that, because maybe that's actually protecting us from getting too big of a voice that we attract the wrong kind of attention, if you know what I'm saying. But we have to be strategic in how we approach delivering this message. And I hate even saying that, because that sounds so culty. All I'm trying to do is figure out what the fuck is going on, get people prepared for what I believe is a very precarious future, which should go without saying at this point. It is raining in December in Saskatchewan, in like the northern part of, not quite northern, but central, which is northern as far as most American viewers are concerned. Okay, typically it's -20, and there's at least a foot of snow on the ground. It rained today. Not just, okay, sleet, a little bit of light snow. No, straight up rain. That is unprecedented. Never seen that in my lifetime. And in the forecast, the next 2 weeks, it's in the single plus digits. So we're reaching a point where shit could get really scary soon. Because and I know a lot of people don't buy the climate thing, I look at the science and I'm telling you, and I've been warning people for some time after time, people try to dismiss it as, oh, it's El Nino, it's this, it's a thing, guys, okay? It's a thing. The resolutions that they're proposing are bullshit. They're not going to work. They're too little too late. The taxation and the controlling all of your movements and all that. Yeah, I get it. I'm against all that. It's a thing. It's raining in December in Saskatchewan, and we just had the biggest wildfire season, completely blew away anything else ever before seen in history, at least in human history. So, yeah, no matter how you slice it, no matter what political affiliation you have, there's a doomsday scenario for you. So all the more reason to prepare for it, learn self-reliance skills, because there may come a point where we are reliant on the carrying capacity of the land and your immediate neighbors, because the lights are going to go out and they're not going to come back on. Until that point, enjoy life with your friends and family. Now that you are a World War III speculative dilettante expert, you can take those 4 things to them and just see what they have to say. Say, did you know that the Russians have been holding back some of their best firepower, some of their ability to mobilize? Did you know that NATO is hinting at a war with said Russians? Did you know that there's this massive border crisis and that the FBI is saying that there's a risk of terror attacks possibly coming from over the border? You don't have to have that conversation. In fact, don't. Enjoy your family this Christmas, but just keep this in the back of your mind and just prepare for the people who are perhaps still a little bit naive to the harsh realities of this world. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.